Hello, welcome to Men's Health Week 2023. This is the first of 5 lunchtime webinars on men's health we're running throughout Men's Health Week. I'm Glen Poole of the Australian Men's Health Forum. This is the Men's Health Connected platform, and today's talk is on the value of mateship to men's health. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands where we all meet from today around Australia. I'm joining you today from the lands of the Bailai, the Gurang, the Gureng-Gureng, and the Tarablang Bunda nations here in central Queensland. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge it's Men's Health Week. It's an event that's been going on for about 25 years or so now. It's an international week. We've been involved in it for many years. And this year in Australia, the theme is healthy habits. And so we're running a series of webinars on some healthy habits for men's health. We've got a session on nutrition, a session on the importance of sleep, a session on alcohol, a session on exercise, and today we're starting with a session on social connection. For those of you just joining us, if you're used to our normal format, which is we're all in the same room together, don't worry, it hasn't gone wrong. This is a webinar format where you can just see the screen, but you can't see the other people in the room. But people here are joining us from all over Australia. And if you want to use the chat function, you can just type in your name and say hello and let us know where you're joining us from today, and other people can see that chat. So this is one of the talks from our Know Your Man Facts campaign, which shares facts about different men's health topics. This one is about the value of mateship and men's health. So, as with all our Know Your Man Facts talks, we're going to go through 4 different areas. We're going to talk about just some key facts about mateship and men's health. Then we're going to look at how mateship plays a role in your health and well-being. We'll talk about what action we can all take to build mateship in a way that improves and maintains our health. And we'll finish with a bit of a focus on how we can help our mates, how we can help others. So let's just crack on with a few facts about mateship and men's health. So this is the big one. Now, when we talk about mateship, we're often thinking about male friendship, and what we're talking about more broadly is just social connection. But why we focus on mateship is when it comes to friendship, we know that most men will have their closest friendships being other men, and most women will have their closest friendships being other women. So while a lot of the facts and figures in this talk will relate to social connection, whether that's with men or with women, we're putting quite a focus on the importance of male friendship. And what we know, what all the evidence shows, is that even when you account for all the other things that make us unhealthy, like smoking, drinking, eating too much, not exercising, all those things that we're aware of, people who have good social connections tend to live many years longer. Social connection really is a health giving quality that it's important to nurture. And that's why it's true to say that men who have good mates will tend to live longer lives. So let's start with a question for you. If we're going to talk about mateship today, then let's think about, well, what is a good mate to me? If you think about the people in your life you'd call a good friend or a good mate, what are the qualities of that friendship that makes it good? Or if you had good friends in the past, what was the quality that made that friendship good? Or if you're imagining the type of friendship you'd like to have, what are the qualities that you would value? Is it someone who has the same sense of humor, or someone who knows you really well, someone who you look up to and respect? This is one of those quizzes where there's no right or wrong answer. I'm not going to say, and the right answer is, because it'll be different for everyone. But it's just an opportunity at the beginning to think about what's important to you. As Michael's just shared in the chat box, put it in the chat box if you want. So we've got honesty from Michael, fun from David. We've got a hello from Kumar. Hey, Kumar, good to see you again. And just a practical note, Renee's asking, do you share any documents we talk about today? Well, this very presentation is available to all on our website under the Know Your Man Facts section. Ed says, shared interests, that's what makes good friendship. And he says, hi to all. G'day, Ed. Good to see you here. And Robin's just shared the link there for you to go and see the documents we've got on social connection, mateship, and men's health. So there's great answers, and here are some more. So these are some of the common answers that people come up with when we ask this question. You know, you can be yourself, you can have a laugh, you can rely on them. They'll help you out. Honesty, as someone else said, they'll listen when you talk to them, and they'll notice when you're doing it tough. So these are the kind of people that we're talking about when we talk about having good mates. Now, we've all got mates in our lives, but they might sort of, where do we sit? Where would we rank ourselves in terms of whether we think we've got really good mates or not so good mates? This is a little the mateship pyramid which we created. The place we'd all love to be is in that really integrated place of having lots of great mates and thinking that we have a sense of belonging. But for many people, there's that feeling of having no mates, and loneliness is a real issue for many people. And loneliness is an interesting phenomenon because it's something that's very hard to measure because it's very subjective. And in a way, that's what defines loneliness. Loneliness is that feeling that you don't have anyone, no one cares. I've got no good mates. No one knows me. No one cares about me. No one would notice if I wasn't around. Those types of sort of thoughts and feelings. Whereas social isolation is actually something that can be more objectively measured. You know, someone lives alone, they don't have contact with anyone on a day-to-day basis, they don't talk to anyone. That can be someone who's socially isolated. And it is possible to be a lone wolf that doesn't have connection with people and be okay with that. And when you ask the question, are you lonely? I go, no. And maybe they're not. But for most of us, we know that having some social connection is really good. So having a few good mates is usually better than having few or no mates. And having lots of great mates who know you really well is probably, for most people, is the ideal. So wherever we are on that sort of pyramid, we can potentially work our way up the pyramid from having no mates to a few mates to good mates to great mates. Now, here's a quiz for you. If you want to chuck in some answers in the chat box, you're very welcome. So we have lots of research from around Australia on how many men have mates or don't have mates. So have a guess. What do you think it is? Is it half of all men? Is it 50%? Or is it just a very small number of blokes who don't have many mates, just 5%? Or is it somewhere between the two? Is it 1 in 10? Is it 1 in 3? Is it 1 in 4? Anyone want to chuck in a guess in the chat box? Rennie's gone for 1 in 2, big number. Anyone else has gone the other end of the scale, maybe about 1 in 20, 5%? Anyone else want to guess? Yeah, David's gone for 1 in 3. Okay, so in a sense, 1 in 4 from Christine. We're going for the full spread. I'm afraid there are no prizes apart from the bragging rights. The answer is you're actually, in some way, you're all right, because there's lots of different ways you can measure this. Different bits of research over the years have come up with different answers. And the big shocking one for me is that though if I reflect on my own life, it doesn't actually surprise me. 3 in 5 blokes say they've actually lost contact with more mates than they would have liked to. So a large chunk of us have had good friends over the years, but then for whatever reason, life has taken us on different pathways. So we've gone to a new job, a new town. We started a family. We've put our focus elsewhere. 3 in 5 of us say we've actually lost contact with more mates than we would have liked. But the number that seems to pop up the most is about 1 in 4. So on average, we say that there's plenty of research to suggest that 1 in 4 men have no good mates. That's quite a significant number. And 1 in 3 of us will actually experience loneliness at some point in our lives. So here's another quiz. Who do we think is most vulnerable to being lonely or not having mates or being sort of socially disconnected? Is it young men? Is it the stereotypical lonely old man? Is it men who are at work, so busy at work they don't have time to connect with mates? Or maybe it's men who don't work at all, so therefore they don't get out to the workplace to make friends. Is it men who are married and spend so much time with their family they don't see their mates? Or is it single or separated men? What do you think? Let's see what sort of things. Yeah, living alone and old, says Renee. Middle age, certainly, says Michael. Being single and a full-time worker, says another Michael. So yeah, I think all of those are really, really good answers. I mean, the truth is, any of those groups can experience social isolation or disconnection. But in terms of the groups that are most at risk, I find that men in midlife and older life, later life, are certainly men without jobs, certainly men living alone, and separation is a big risk factor. Single dads, by which we mean, dads who are separated or they've lost their partner, who are looking after the kids, far more likely to be isolated than single mums. Interestingly, there's far fewer of them. But one of the key risk factors as well, which isn't mentioned here, is points of transition. So, young men are mentioned there, but we find that when young men transition from school or go to university or go from school into not working, they're particularly at risk. They may be surrounded by loads of male friends at school, and then they go their separate ways. So there's lots of points in our life where we actually can become at risk of becoming disconnected. If we move to a new town, if we change job, if we separate, if we transition from work to retirement, there are all times to actually consider we might actually need to reevaluate what our social connections are, because we might be at risk of losing some. So that's the sort of general facts about mateship and men's health. But what about how specifically it can shape your health? So another quiz. Took some answers in the chat box. The reason we make this a men's health issue is because there are actually loads of great research studies that have found that lack of social connection can increase risk of certain illnesses, and actually the presence of social connection can be a protective factor. So anyone want to have a guess which of these? We've listed 7 here. And we're saying 3 of these is actually linked to mateship. Who wants to have a guess? Is it got no mates, more likely to have a heart attack? Is it got no mates, more likely to get prostate cancer? Is it got no mates, more likely to drink? Got no mates, more likely to have trouble sleeping? So Ed's gone for obesity, depression, and drug abuse. Renee, suicide, drug and alcohol abuse, obesity. Depression and suicide, Peter. Christine, sleep, yeah, drug and alcohol, depression. Yeah, suicide, drug, alcohol, and depression. David's gone for 4. Okay, good. All good answers. And interestingly, I don't think any of you have put prostate cancer. And it was a little bit of a trick question in the sense that all of these, with the exception of prostate cancer, have been linked to a lack of social connection. So it impacts many parts of our health and well-being: risk of chronic disease, risk of biomarkers like weight, risk of mental health issues, risk of suicidal thoughts. The only one that it isn't connected to is whether you've got 100 great mates or no mates, your risk of actually getting prostate cancer is the same. But even then, if you do get prostate cancer and have surgery, your chances of good recovery are increased by the level of social connection you have. So even where lack of social connection isn't causing an illness, it certainly impacts your ability to recover and stay well afterwards. In fact, it's been found that having no mates is as unhealthy as 15 smokes a day. So I often make the point here that if you're in a workplace and you observe the blokes going out at smoko time, you could make the case that the blokes who turn left to go to the smoko with their mates are healthier than the bloke who turns right to eat a salad on his own in the park. Now, that's probably not true, but it makes the point that actually there's more to health than just those key things we often think about, like, being healthy, eating well, exercise. All those things are important. All those things are important. But if we do all of that, but we don't take care of things like relationships, then actually we're missing out on something that's really health giving. And the ideal is, of course, is you have lots of mates and you don't smoke. We also know that having no mates is bad for the heart. 30% increase in risk of heart disease amongst men with no social connection. So, and that's the biggest killer of men in Australia. We often talk about the suicide crisis, but the number one killer of men in Australia is heart disease. And under the age of 75, 4 in 5 people who die of heart disease are men. Now, there's things like exercise and losing weight and stopping smoking and drinking less that can improve your heart health. But one of the ways we can cut heart disease in men is also by creating opportunities for men to build better friendships, better social connection. And this one probably doesn't surprise you, but it's kind of one of those things that you instinctively know. The man who's alone, has no friends, more likely to be at risk of suicide. But sort of proving that is quite difficult. We have a really good bit of research from Australia, from the 10 to Men study, looking at a really large group of men over time, and found that those men who didn't have social connections, good social connection, were twice as likely to have suicidal thoughts. So again, mateship is a real good protective factor for our mental health, and even issues as serious as suicide. So let's make it personal. That's as we move towards the sort of the end of this conversation. Let's think about ourselves and our lives and the mates that we've got. And it can just be the male friends, or it can be the wider circle of male and female friends. And for any women watching today, it can just be about your friendships, because social connection improves both men's health and women's health. So here's another quiz. Again, this is one of these no wrong answers questions. What are three things we could all do to make our social network stronger? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the chat box. And I know someone's just put a comment in there from previously. So what are you thinking? You don't have to give us 3 examples, just give one. What's one thing that you could do or others could do to strengthen their social networks? Just going to read this comment from Renee. The main problem I found, if you're over 30, you have less options or support than you are under or over 60. If you're over, so I think, Rennie, what you're saying is if you're working age, sort of 30 to 65, there's less options. That's certainly true with men. We'd certainly say that that we often talk about the men's sheds. There's more men's sheds in Australia than there are McDonald's. There's something like 1,300 men's sheds now. So when we talk about social connection for older men, we go down the men's shed. Though throw a party. This is just, I'm going to come back to this point. So Frank's saying throw a party. Yeah, great idea. David's saying join a club of shared interest. Yeah, what kind of clubs out there? What kind of activities do you like doing? Margie is saying hobbies, sports, volunteering. These are all great ideas. Just going to complete that point about men under 65. Something we've started to see happen in the last 5 years is there's been this massive upswell of men's social groups forming, these free groups where men get together on a weekly basis, usually to do some kind of activity. So we have things like the Man Walk, where blokes get together once a week, and their motto is walk, talk, support. There's one in Penrith, the Penrith Men's Walk and Talk, where hundreds of men get together every Thursday. And through the process of just simple act of going for a walk, they're building social connection and friendship. There's the Tough Guy Book Club. They meet in pubs. They read books and talk about the books they've been reading. And again, they build connection once a month by meeting up in the pub. We've got the Mr. Perfect barbecues. We've got the men's table, which is where guys get together once a month around over a cheap meal where they connect. So there aren't as many sort of like groups for men under 60 as there are men's sheds, but there's certainly a number growing. Any other suggestions? What I like about all these suggestions for men is they're all very action orientated. Do something, get together. They're fun based. They're action orientated. So, like I said, there's no right or wrong answers here, but we said there's kind of 3 key ways that you can strengthen your social network. So, step 1 is actually thinking about old mates. Remember, 3 in 5 men say they've lost contact with more friends over their lifetime. So if we're looking around our network and thinking, I've not got many mates, looking back through time about, well, who did I really get on with? Who do I really know? And how can I stay in contact with them? But also there's opportunities to make new mates. And then with the mates we have, it's how do we build closer connections? Because sometimes that's the challenge we have, is that we know lots of people, but none of those people really know us because the connection is fairly superficial. That's a common complaint. We'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, but there's a few more things in the chat box here. So yes, people mentioning groups like Rotary and Lions. David's saying of the importance about taking action. And then Rennie making the point, but yeah, there's a lot of groups are mostly under 35. So yeah, take that point on board, Rennie. It can be tough to find the right types of groups for you. So just to look a little bit further at those 3. So yeah, as we said, staying in contact with old mates, school reunion, getting the boys together once a year. I know people who have like a group of old mates that they'll always get together once a year. So no matter how busy they are, no matter how far they're spread around the country, actually making sure once a year that they connect. And sometimes you've got to be the person who actually gets out there and makes that happen. Obviously, in terms of making new mates, I think there's a lot of great suggestions already. I think that thing about actually activity, whether it's going to a park run, whether it's volunteering, whether it's going to a men's groups, only by getting out there and engaging and acting with and interacting with people can we begin to actually make connection. One bit of advice I once heard, which I think is excellent, is get a dog. Not just because a dog can be a great companion and provide social connection, but also once you have a dog and you have to start walking a dog, you start to meet all the other dog walkers, and they may know you. They may probably know your dog's name before they know you, but over time, dog ownership is one way you connect to a new community. And Peter says, while talking and listening are important, that's that sort of, chatting and making connection through conversation. Peter makes a really important point that in general, men find validation in accomplishing something. And there's a lot of truth in that. It's the old story that men talk shoulder to shoulder. Men are action orientated. Of course, not all men, but that's certainly one of the ways that men bond is through action and activity, a shared goal, a shared mission, whether that's a sports team or some kind of club, or taking on a challenge that, you make up yourselves. That's great, Peter. Thanks for that point. And the final point, I'm going to now say the most controversial thing I'm going to say all day. I'm going to use a lazy gender stereotype. You may agree with it, you may not. I'm not saying it's true, but I think it points to something which is quite interesting. It's sometimes said that the way that men connect with their friends is by insulting each other and not really meaning it. And the way that women connect with their friends is by complimenting each other and not really meaning it. Now, I don't know if that's true of all. It's certainly not true of all people. And I'm not even going to make any comment about the truth of women and their friends. But what I will say is, as a man, my experience, the idea that men will insult their friends and not really mean it is a major part of how men do friendship. I noticed there's quite a few comments in the chat, so I'm going to respond to those. A comment of laughing faces, someone saying bugger off and laughing and a thumbs up. So there's some truth in that, right? So certainly let's not talk about the bit about women because I cannot speak from experience of being a woman. I can just speak about experience from being a man. I've had hundreds of conversations with men around the world and around Australia about what they like and don't like about being a man, about their male friends, and about men in general. And you get lots of different answers, but I can guarantee you that whenever I have that conversation, one of the things that comes up every single time when I ask people what they like about being a bloke, about other men, about men in general, they will use the word banter. And so I know that's not true for all men, but most men I talk to say, I really like that blokey banter you get with your mates. And then if you ask the next question, which is what don't you like about being a man? What don't you like about some of your mates? What don't you like about men in general? Do you know what they'll say? They'll say the banter. So it's a love-hate relationship. The reason they say they don't like the banter is because sometimes they want to go beyond the banter and have a bit more of a deeper conversation. And so I think, this is one of our challenges as men is in terms of strengthening our social networks. It isn't always about getting more mates. It's not always about broadening our network, but it's about deepening our network, about deepening our relationships with other men. And that's where it goes from being shoulder to shoulder and being a bit more heart to heart and having more honest and open conversations. That can be difficult and it can be challenging. It can be difficult when you've built up a sort of a habit of always doing banter. But it's something, particularly as we go through stages of life, that we start to, more and more men start to crave that desire to go beyond banter. And so all I've got on that is it's a two-way process in terms of you building deeper connection with other men. Sometimes it's about you being more vulnerable and taking more of a risk in terms of what you're prepared to share of yourself. And in terms of other men being a bit more vulnerable and open with you, it's about you being prepared to listen more deeply. And for anyone on the call who's been part of different men's groups and men's circles over the years, they'll tell you that actually if you create the space where men are listened to, then men will talk more deeply. So, and that sort of links nicely to the final point I want to make today. So what can we do to help others, to help our mates? Well, one thing we can do is we can look out for mates who might be doing it tough. At the Australian Men's Health Forum, we produced a guide last year called How to Help a Mate Doing It Tough. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend you go and check it out on our website, the Help a Mate Guide. It's an excellent tool. We developed it in consultation and conversation with people who've been working with men for years. So on one level, it's an Are You OK tool, but it's an Are You OK tool for men specifically. And it applies to either men or women. And it's about how do we have meaningful conversations with men when they're doing it tough. If you have a look in the chat box, Robin's just shared a link there. You can download that guide for free. And we've also produced some hard copies of the guide now. Send us an email if you'd like some. We're really keen to get the guides out there and shared in places where they can be beneficial. It's a 16-page document which goes in detail, but at the heart of the document is this simple 3-step guide. And first and foremost, if you want to have a meaningful conversation with a bloke who's doing it tough, step one is to actually just ask and listen. It's to say something like, hey, mate, I noticed you've not been yourself recently. It seems like you're doing it tough. What's going on? Do you want to tell me? And we find that if we ask a really straight question of a bloke like that, and then we listen without needing to fix, without trying to judge, that most men will actually welcome the opportunity to tell their story, to get it off their chest. And particularly if we just ask in really plain language, we don't ask, tell us about your feelings, and we don't ask complicated questions, just ask, tell us what's going on, then that's a real starting point for a bloke to actually tell you, yeah, I've been struggling a bit and it's because of this, this and this. Talk's great. And for some blokes, just having the opportunity to get it off their chest is certainly helpful. But men are also often very action orientated. So thinking about what's next, building a plan. And the key question here is, well, what could you do now? What could you do next? How do you think I can help you? It can be really useful rather than just leaving the conversation as spilling guts and then moving on. And then the important thing to remember here is we're not asking you to be all of a sudden amateur psychologists and amateur counselors. Really, you're just being a mate who's putting your hand on a mate's shoulder and saying, I've noticed you're not doing so well. You can tell me about it. But really, it's not your responsibility to fix them and sort that out. So being aware of some of the other help that's out there that you can connect them to if they need it. What kind of help do you think you need? Have you tried this? Would you think it's a good idea to go here? And then you can always agree to check in with them a little bit later. So that's a basic sort of 2-minute guide to helping a mate doing it tough. But it's also a bit of a guide to building closer connection. If we go beyond the banter and ask those sort of slightly deeper questions and are prepared to listen, it's one way we start to build much closer connections with our male friends over time. So that is the end of the talk. And all I have to do now is to review the 10 key facts we've just shared with you about mateship and men's health. So, as I said right at the very beginning, mateship's important because men with mates live longer lives. We reckon that about 1 in 4 men in Australia have no good mates, and a lot of us, about 1 in 3, will experience loneliness at some time in our lives. Why is this a health topic? Well, because having no mates is as unhealthy as some really bad things like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yeah, has a positive impact on our physical health. For example, we know that men with no mates are at greater risk of heart disease, up to 30% greater risk. And obviously, not great for our mental health either. So having no mates, for example, increases our risk of depression, anxiety, and our risk of suicidal thoughts. And of course, the opposite is then true. Having mates is good for our physical health, and having mates is good for our mental health. So we know that mateship is something that keeps men healthy. What can we do about it? Remember, we had our 3 steps. 1, staying in contact with your old mates. 2, take action to make new mates. And 3, build those deeper connections with the mates you've already got. And finally, if you're concerned about a mate who might be doing it tough, remember our ABC, ask and listen, build a plan and connect to help. More details on that in the Know Your Man Facts and how to help a mate doing it tough guide available on our website. So that's the end of Men's Health Week webinar number 1. Great comment from David. Thank you, David. That's great. Glen, keep in touch, says David. Thank you, David. We will do. Thank you all. We have 4 more talks this week. Guess what? You'll be glad to know they're not all by me. I'll be back to talk about exercise and men's health later in the week. But we've got some expert speakers from some other organizations coming to talk about alcohol and men's health, nutrition and men's health, and sleep and men's health. Please do spread the word and invite others along. We'll be sending you out a little feedback survey to get your feedback on this session. But other than that, I'm done and I'm off for a healthy lunch with me mates. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.